Hello everyone. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below telling me where you're from and what time you're watching. That helps YouTube know you want more stories like this. Now, let's get started. The drive between Madison and Milwaukee typically runs about 80 minutes. But on Thanksgiving evening, the deserted highway stretched before me like a dark ribbon beneath the November moon. Having graduated nursing school back in 2008, I'd been driving this same route for more than 10 years, always promising my mom I'd text as soon as I got home safely. That night, my stomach still full from turkey and green bean casserole, I had the heater on high and a true crime podcast streaming through the speakers. The host was explaining how predators frequently operate in pairs when my headlights picked up movement near the tree line. At first, I assumed it was just another deer. Wisconsin has millions of them. But then I realized it was smaller, moving strangely, favoring one side like it was badly injured. I pulled over roughly 30 feet ahead of where I'd spotted it, leaving the engine running because some deep instinct told me to keep the car ready to go. When I opened my door a crack, the dome light lit up the shoulder. And there it was. A medium-sized dog, maybe 40 pounds, with brown and white patches dragging its back left leg. The poor animal looked like it had been hit by a car. Not so badly it was dying, but it clearly needed help. The pitiful whimper it made when it tried to walk sent my nurse instincts into overdrive. I grabbed the emergency blanket from my back seat, thinking I could wrap the dog up and take it to the 24-hour vet clinic near my apartment. The dog stayed about 15 feet away, not running, but not approaching either, just standing there shivering in the cold Wisconsin air. That's when I heard another vehicle coming up behind me, which wasn't unusual, except it slowed down and stopped about 20 feet back. They didn't have their headlights on, which I found odd because the interstate was pitch black that night. Only their amber parking lights glowed. I thought maybe they saw my hazard lights and assumed I needed assistance. It happens all the time on these rural roads. But then both passenger doors opened at the exact same moment, synchronized as if they'd rehearsed it, and two figures got out. In my side mirror, I could just make out their silhouettes against the dim light from their car's interior before the doors shut. One was noticeably bigger, with broader shoulders, and they both moved with a deliberate walk that set off every alarm bell in my head. "Buster." "There you are, buddy," the smaller one called out, their voice carrying clearly in the still night. But something in the tone was completely wrong, too practiced, like they were reciting from a script. The dog didn't react, didn't turn its head, didn't wag its tail, nothing. It just kept looking at me with those pained eyes. The bigger one started making kissing noises, the kind you make to call your pet, but he was walking toward my car, not toward the dog. My hand was still on the door handle, half in and half out of the driver's seat, when the smaller one said something that made my entire body freeze. "Ma'am, could you help us grab him? He doesn't trust strangers, but if you're already out of your car..." The dog was positioned between us and them, but neither of them was looking at it. They were both looking directly at me. Every self-defense lesson I'd ever taken, every warning my dad had drilled into me since I was 16, it all became crystal clear in that single moment. I yanked my leg back into the car so fast I smacked my knee against the steering column, slammed the door shut, and hit the lock button. The bigger one broke into a sprint the instant my door closed. And I mean a full-on sprint, closing the distance to my car in just seconds. His fist slammed against my window with enough force I thought the glass might shatter. His face pressed to it, mouth moving, forming words I couldn't hear over the sound of my own screaming. My transmission was still in park, and my fingers felt thick and useless as I scrambled for the gear shift. The smaller one had already circled around to the passenger side, trying the door handle, then hammering on that window too. And with their bodies blocking my mirrors, I couldn't see anything behind me to reverse safely. The dog just stood there through it all. Hadn't moved a single inch despite all the chaos. That detail cut through my sheer panic. A genuinely hurt animal would have flinched or run, not remained perfectly still with people sprinting and yelling. I threw the car into drive instead of reverse, stomping on the accelerator, my tires screeching against the asphalt. In my rear view, lit red by my taillights, I saw them both sprinting back to their own car. And that's when I noticed they had left both doors wide open the whole time. Ready for a fast getaway. My speedometer read 80 before I even registered it, taking the curves of that dark highway at a dangerous speed. I didn't slow down until I saw the glow of a gas station about 3 miles ahead. My phone was in the cup holder. I grabbed it at a red light and called 911 with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The operator stayed on the line while I pulled into the gas station, parking directly under the bright lights in front of the building doors. I gave her the mile marker and described their car as best I could. A dark sedan, maybe a Chrysler or a Dodge. No front license plate that I'd seen. The two people, one around 6 feet with a heavy build, wearing what looked like a baseball cap, the other shorter and thinner, both in dark clothing. While I was still talking, a highway patrol officer pulled into the gas station, already in the area, and he took my full statement right there in the parking lot. He radioed for another unit to check that stretch of interstate, then looked right at me and said something that made my stomach drop. "You did the right thing driving off. We've had 2 reports this month of a similar setup, same area, a fake injured animal near the trees." What really got me was when he asked about the dog's behavior, just nodding when I described how it didn't react to their calls or the commotion. "Probably trained for this," he explained, saying some people teach dogs to limp on command, rewarding them for staying put no matter what happens around them. The idea of someone taking what could have been a friendly pet and turning it into bait for God knows. What made me feel sick? Another officer radioed, in about 20 minutes later, to report. They'd found fresh tire marks where I'd described, but no sign of the car or the dog. They increased patrols in that area for weeks after, but as far as I know, they were never caught. The officer gave me his card, told me to call if I remembered anything else or felt unsafe, and suggested I vary my routes home for a while. I didn't sleep that night or for the next 3 nights, just kept replaying every moment. The way they moved in perfect sync, how the smaller one's voice had that fake concerned tone, like someone who had rehearsed the line too many times. I started looking up similar incidents online and fell into a rabbit hole of forum posts from truckers and late-night drivers across the Midwest. The same pattern in Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota. Always rural highways, always between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., always targeting women driving alone. Some posts described different bait scenarios. A person flagging for help with a partner hiding in a ditch. Abandoned baby carriers on the shoulder that turn out to be empty. Even fake accident scenes. The general consensus was that these are often operations by human trafficking rings, targeting isolated victims on empty stretches where screams go unheard and witnesses are non-existent. My mom called the next morning, casual as ever, asking if I'd gotten home safe like she always does after family dinners. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what happened. I just said yes, traffic was light, everything was fine. But I've told pretty much everyone else since, especially women who drive alone, because that's what haunts me the most. If I hadn't kept my engine running, if I'd walked those extra 15 feet toward that dog, if I'd been a little more trusting or a little less paranoid, I would have been another missing person case. They would have found my car on the shoulder, door open, hazard lights still blinking with no trace of where I'd gone. My family would have spent the rest of their lives wondering what happened between Madison and Milwaukee on a cold Thanksgiving night. The detective who followed up a week later told me something that explained why they probably chose that exact spot. The forest there connects to a maze of old logging roads, unmapped trails that lead deep into wilderness where nobody goes in the winter. Perfect for moving vehicles unseen, for transferring victims, for making people disappear. He also mentioned the timing wasn't random. Holiday nights, when police are stretched thin with drunk drivers and domestic calls, when response times to rural areas are at their slowest. These people had clearly done their homework, studied patterns, knew exactly when and where to set their trap. The fake limp was probably practiced hundreds of times, the dog conditioned with treats and praise until it could hold that injured pose no matter the chaos around it. I still drive that route to visit my parents, though now I take the longer way through town after dark, adding 20 minutes but buying peace of mind. Sometimes I wonder about that dog, whether it was stolen from a loving home, bought from a shady breeder, or raised from a puppy for this exact terrible purpose. I wonder if those two are still out there, maybe in another state by now, setting up on some other dark highway with their well-trained decoy. But mostly I think about the women who might have stopped before me. The ones who didn't keep their engines running, who trusted their compassion over their instincts. The ones whose families are still searching, still hoping, still checking their phones for a text that says, "Made it home safe." Denver gets quiet when it snows, and that November night was no different. As I walk Cooper along the empty streets near my apartment, my boots crunched in the fresh powder while he pulled at his leash, his nose buried in every new smell along Colfax Avenue. I'd moved into the second-floor unit 6 months before, right after the divorce papers made me officially single again at 29. The building was one of those converted Victorians from the 1920s, complete with clanking radiators and floors that announced your every step. But Cooper and I had made it our home. That night started like every other. I'd gotten back from my warehouse shift around 9, found Cooper doing his desperate potty dance by the door, and bundled up for our usual walk. The temperature had plunged below freezing, and thick snowflakes fell steadily, muffling the sounds of the few passing cars and turning Denver into a scene from a snow globe. We walked past the dumpsters behind the building, Cooper taking his sweet time despite my constant shivering, and I remember noticing how pristine everything looked, like the world had been tucked under a clean, white sheet. After Cooper finished his business at his usual spots, we looped back toward the front entrance, passing the old fire escape clinging to the building's side. Snow had piled on every step and platform, creating perfect, unbroken layers that must have been building for hours. Something caught my eye as I looked up toward my living room window on the second floor. The curtains I always kept shut were parted just a little in the middle, creating a narrow gap where the warm indoor light spilled out into the dark. Strange, I thought, but figured the old radiator must have kicked on and created a draft strong enough to shift the fabric. Cooper raced up the interior stairwell ahead of me, leaving wet paw prints on the worn carpet while I trudged behind him, feeling every hour of my shift in my sore back. As we got closer to apartment 2B, I could hear my TV through the door, but something was off about the sound. I clearly remembered leaving it on ESPN for the Lakers game, but now I was hearing the drone of a weather report. Some meteorologist talking about storm systems and weekend forecasts. I unlocked the door and Cooper burst inside, beelining for his water bowl in the kitchen while I stood in the doorway, staring at the screen. The local news was on, showing a reporter standing in the snow downtown, but I was certain I'd been watching basketball before we left. The remote sat on the coffee table right where I'd left it. For a second, I wondered if the cable had glitched or the game had ended early. I towed off my wet boots, hung Cooper's leash on its hook, and walked over to grab the remote, switching back to ESPN, where the game was still playing in the fourth quarter. My apartment wasn't much, just a simple one-bedroom where the living room opened into a small kitchen. But I was used to all its normal sounds, every particular creak of the floorboards, and that night something felt different. The air felt warmer than it should have, like the heat had been running longer than the 20 minutes we'd been gone. And there was a faint smell I couldn't place, something like wet wool and old cigarette smoke. Cooper had finished drinking and was now sniffing intently near the coat closet by the front door, his tail stiff and his body tense in that way dogs get when they sense something isn't right. I walked over to pull him back, thinking maybe a mouse had found its way in through the walls again when I heard it. A cough, not loud but muffled and quick, like someone was trying to suppress it, and it came from inside the closet. Every muscle in my body locked solid. That primal freeze response when your brain recognizes danger before you've fully processed it. Cooper started to growl, a low rumbling sound I'd never heard from him before, the fur along his spine standing straight up as he stared at the closet door. The blood was pounding in my ears so hard I could barely think. But I managed to grab Cooper's collar and slowly back toward my bedroom, trying to remember if I'd left my phone on the nightstand or if it was still in my jacket pocket. The closet door was one of those old accordion styles that never closed properly, and through the narrow gap at the bottom, I could see the shadow of feet. Work boots, from what I could tell, much larger than mine, with snow still melting off them and creating small, dark puddles on my hardwood floor. My brain switched into a weird overdrive, simultaneously screaming at me to run while also noting stupid details, like how those puddles were going to ruin the wood if they sat there too long. Cooper's growling grew louder, more aggressive, and whoever was in that closet shifted their weight, making the door rattle softly on its track. I kept backing up, pulling Cooper with me, when my hip bumped the corner of the kitchen counter and sent the ceramic key bowl crashing to the floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the tense silence. And immediately, I heard movement from the closet, fast and deliberate, like someone preparing to come out. Without a second thought, I yanked Cooper into my bedroom and slammed the door, engaging the flimsy push-button lock that wouldn't stop anyone determined to get in. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely pull my phone from my jacket pocket. nearly dropping it twice before I managed to dial 911. While the phone rang, I pressed my ear to the bedroom door and heard heavy footsteps moving through my apartment. Not even trying to be quiet now, just walking around like they owned the place. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered as clearly as I could that someone had broken in and was still there, repeating my address on Colfax Avenue twice because I was so frantic. The dispatcher told me units were on their way, to stay where I was and stay on the line. But all I could focus on was the sound of my kitchen drawers being opened, that specific metallic slide, and knowing exactly which one held my kitchen knives. The footsteps moved from the kitchen into the hallway leading to my bedroom, slow and purposeful, and I could hear this raspy breathing that wasn't mine or Cooper's. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept beside my bed, a leftover from my softball days, and positioned myself between Cooper and the door, trying to control my own breathing so I could listen. The dispatcher kept asking me questions, but I could barely process them. I just kept whispering, "He's getting closer. Please hurry. He's right outside my door now." Then the footsteps stopped. For maybe 10 seconds that felt like hours. There was complete silence except for Cooper's continuous low growl and my own heart hammering against my ribs. The doorknob rattled just once, a testing kind of turn to see if it was locked. And then I heard him laugh, this quiet, raspy chuckle that made my whole body go cold. It wasn't angry or frustrated, just amused, like this was all some kind of game to him. I heard him walk back down the hallway, and then came the sounds I'll never forget. My couch cushions being shifted, papers rustling, drawers in my living room desk opening and closing. He was searching for something, or maybe just going through my things because he could, because he'd been in my space while I was gone, and now felt entitled to it. The dispatcher said police were 3 minutes out. But 3 minutes feels like a lifetime when there's only a thin door and a useless lock between you and someone who has broken into your home. Through the bedroom window, I could see the snow was still falling steadily. The fire escape outside was still covered in white, just as I had seen from the ground. Except now I understood that those perfect untouched layers I'd noticed earlier had been a complete lie. He must have carefully brushed the snow back into place after climbing up, erasing his tracks, which meant he'd planned this. Watched me leave with Cooper before he made his move. Suddenly, I heard sirens in the distance growing louder, and the sounds from my living room stopped dead. Fast footsteps crossed my apartment, and I heard my front door slam open so hard it hit the wall. I stayed frozen, the bat still raised. Cooper pressed against my legs as we listened to the heavy boots pounding down the interior stairs. The dispatcher was saying something, but I couldn't focus on her words. I just waited until the sirens were right outside my building before I finally unlocked my bedroom door with trembling fingers. My apartment looked wrecked. Every drawer was pulled out, cushions were thrown on the floor, papers were scattered everywhere. The closet door hung open, and inside I could see where he'd pushed my coats aside to hide, the hangers still swaying slightly. Wet boot prints were everywhere, leading from the window to the closet, then throughout my entire apartment, and finally out the still wide-open front door. 2 cops arrived first, both younger guys who seemed almost as nervous as I felt, followed by an older detective who took one look at the scene and immediately called for a crime scene unit. They found where he'd jimmied my living room window from the fire escape, the lock completely broken, the wood around the frame splintered. The detective, a woman named Reeves, who had a very calm way of talking, explained there had been a string of similar break-ins in the neighborhood, always during snowstorms when footprints would get covered quickly, always targeting second-floor apartments with fire escape access. What made my case different, she said, was that I'd come home while he was still inside. The others had been out for hours, returning to find their places ransacked. They collected fingerprints from the window frame and the closet door, took photos of the boot prints before they could dry completely, and had me walk through to see if anything was missing. My laptop was still there, my TV, even the cash I'd left on my dresser. That somehow made it worse, knowing he wasn't really after my things, but something else. Maybe just the thrill of being in someone's private space. Detective Reeves found something I had missed in my panic. A half-eaten sandwich on my kitchen counter, made with my bread, my turkey, my mustard, with a single bite taken out of it like he'd been having a casual snack. Next to it was an open beer from my fridge, mostly empty, condensation still beating on the bottle. The violation of that hit me harder than the ransacked drawers. This person had made himself at home, eaten my food, drunk my beer, probably sat on my couch and watched my TV while I was walking Cooper in the snow. She bagged it all for evidence and mentioned they'd found similar scenes at the other break-ins. The intruder always helped himself to food, always left that signature half-eaten meal behind like a calling card. Cooper hadn't left my side since the police arrived, pressing against my legs whenever anyone moved too fast. I knew he had sensed the danger before I had tried to warn me with his tense body language that something was wrong with that closet. They caught him 5 days later, trying the same thing 3 blocks away at another Victorian conversion. The homeowner had installed a security camera after hearing about the break-ins, and it caught him clear as day, climbing the fire escape during another snowstorm. Gregory Watts, 43 years old, had been living in his car since being evicted 6 months earlier. Detective Reeves called to tell me they'd found items from all the break-ins in his car, including a notebook where he'd written down addresses, schedules, and details about the residents. My entry was there: 2B Colfax, single male, dog, walks 9:30 p.m. most nights, works late shift. He had been watching us for weeks, learning our routine, waiting for the perfect snowy night. The court gave him 18 months. I got a victim notification letter saying he'd be eligible for parole in 9. I moved out the next month, found a ground floor place with better locks and no fire escape, though Cooper and I still do our evening walks. But even now, whenever it snows, whenever I come home to find something slightly out of place, a curtain shifted or a cushion moved, I think about that cough from the closet and have to check every door, every window, every possible hiding spot before I can finally breathe normally again. The week after Halloween always feels strange in our neighborhood, like the whole street is recovering from a sugar hangover. That Monday in 2018 was no different. I'd just gotten my daughter, Chloe, to bed around 8:30, which was a miracle considering she was still buzzing from the leftover candy I'd foolishly let her have after dinner. Being 33 with a 6-year-old meant most of my evenings looked exactly like this: kitchen cleanup, lunch prep for the next day, and if I was lucky, maybe 45 minutes of a show before I passed out on the couch. We lived in a little ranch-style house just outside Jefferson City. It was nothing fancy, but it had a good school district and a big backyard for Chloe to play in. The divorce had been finalized that spring, and honestly, those first few months of just the two of us had been tougher than I'd expected. But by November, we'd found our rhythm. Around 9:30, just as I was folding the last of Chloe's school uniforms, the doorbell rang. Nobody ever came to our door that late on a Monday, especially not in early November when it got dark by 6 and the temperature dropped into the 40s. Through the peephole, I saw 2 figures in dark hoodies standing on my porch. Both looked like teenagers from their height and build, though I couldn't see their faces with the hoods up. They were whispering to each other and giggling, that nervous laugh kids get when they're pulling a prank. I figured it was some late trick-or-treating dare or they'd lost a bet. Without opening the door, I flicked the porch light on and off twice, my universal signal for go away, and watched through the side window as they looked at each other, laughed harder, then jogged down my driveway and disappeared into the dark street. I went back to the laundry, but something about the whole thing kept nagging at me. Maybe it was how they'd stood there, not quite natural, like bad actors in a school play. The taller one had kept his head tilted down the whole time, and the shorter one's giggle had a weird, mechanical rhythm to it, like he was forcing it out on cue. But I brushed it off. Teenagers are weird, and after teaching 3rd grade for 5 years before having Chloe, I'd seen kids do much stranger things for attention. I made a cup of chamomile tea, checked that the front door was locked, twice, actually, and settled on the living room couch with my laptop to finish some lesson plans for my online tutoring students. 10 minutes later, I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping on glass. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was coming from the back of the house, from the sliding glass door that opened onto our deck. My whole body went rigid. The tapping continued, patient and steady, and I could picture someone standing out there in the darkness of my backyard, knuckles against the glass, waiting. The motion sensor light back there had been broken since September. I'd kept putting off fixing it, so whoever was out there was standing in complete darkness. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the kitchen, staying low, keeping out of the direct line of sight to that glass door. From where I crouched behind the kitchen island, I could just make out a shape through the glass, a dark silhouette against the slightly lighter darkness of the yard. It wasn't moving, just standing there, one arm raised as if about to knock again. The figure seemed taller than I remembered either kid being. But maybe it was the angle, or maybe one was standing on my deck furniture. I dialed 911 but didn't hit call yet. What would I even say? That someone knocked on my door and now they're in my backyard? The tapping started again, but this time it was different. Lower on the door, like whoever was out there had knelt down. Then I heard something that made my chest tighten. The subtle rattle of the door handle being tested. Gentle at first, then more insistent when it didn't budge. My phone screen lit up my face in the dark, and I swear the silhouette outside shifted, as if it had noticed the glow. I held my breath and watched as the shape moved sideways along the glass, disappearing from view. For maybe 20 seconds, there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then came a scraping sound from the other side of the house, metal on wood, and I realized with a jolt of horror what was happening. They were checking the windows. The scraping moved from the guest bedroom window to the bathroom, getting closer to Chloe's room. That broke my paralysis completely. I hit call on 911 and stood up, not caring anymore if they saw me, because nobody was getting near my daughter's window. Not while I was conscious and breathing. The dispatcher answered on the second ring. I whispered as clearly as I could that someone was trying to break into my house, gave her my address, and told her my 6-year-old was asleep in her room. She kept me on the line, saying units were on their way, maybe 5 minutes out, and to stay away from windows and doors. But I was already moving down the hallway toward Chloe's room, phone pressed to my ear, when I heard something that stopped me cold. Laughter from outside her window. That same mechanical giggling from earlier, but now it was accompanied by a second voice, deeper, definitely adult, muttering something I couldn't make out. Through the thin curtains of Chloe's room, I could see the shadows of 2 figures right outside, and one of them was doing something to the window screen. Pulling at the corner where it met the frame, I burst into Chloe's room, scooped her up while she was still half asleep, blanket and all, and carried her into my bedroom closet on the opposite side of the house. She mumbled something about a bad dream, and I whispered that we were playing a hiding game, that she needed to be super quiet, like when we play hide and seek. My beautiful, trusting daughter just nodded against my shoulder and closed her eyes again. The dispatcher was still talking, but I could barely focus on her words because now I could hear them at the front door again. Not knocking this time, but doing something to the lock. A metallic scratching sound that went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. Then suddenly, silence. Complete, total silence. Even the dispatcher seemed to sense it because she stopped asking questions and just said, "Officers are 2 minutes out. Stay where you are." We sat in that closet, Chloe breathing softly against my neck, me trying not to hyperventilate, surrounded by the smell of my winter coats and old shoes. Then I heard something that to this day makes me nauseous when I think about it. Footsteps on the roof. Slow, careful footsteps directly above us, moving from the edge toward the center of the house. Our attic access was just a simple pull-down panel in the hallway ceiling, and I'd never once thought to check if it could be locked from the inside. The footsteps stopped directly above that spot. Then I heard a low creak, the sound old timber makes when pressure is applied. The dispatcher must have heard the catch in my breath because she whispered, "Officers are on your street now, 30 seconds away." The sirens cut through the night before the footsteps could move again. Immediately, the sounds on the roof turned into a frantic scramble, a heavy, running weight moving fast toward the back of the house. I heard a solid thump, like someone jumping down onto the deck, and then nothing. The dispatcher told me to stay put until the officers cleared the scene. I just held Chloe tighter, feeling the steady, trusting beat of her heart against my chest. When the police finally gave the all clear, and I carried my daughter back to her bed, she was still fast asleep, completely unaware of how close we had come to something terrible. The officers found deep footprints in the flower bed beneath her window. The screen had been sliced open with what looked like a box cutter, and there were fresh scratch marks around the front door lock, like someone had tried to force it with crude tools. But here's the part that still keeps me up at night. The reason I'm sharing this story now, years later, after we've moved to a different state entirely. The next morning, an officer returned with a detective and asked to see my security camera footage. I'd forgotten about the camera completely. My ex-husband had installed a cheap wireless one by the front door the year before, and I hardly ever checked it. We pulled up the app on my phone and scrolled back to the night before. What we saw made the detective immediately call for backup. The first person at my door, the shorter one I'd mistaken for a teenager, was wearing a rubber Halloween mask. One of those old man masks with wrinkled skin and wispy gray hair. But it was the taller figure that made everyone in the room go silent. It was definitely an adult man, probably in his 40s, wearing a plastic mask of a teenager's face, the kind that only covers the front with elastic straps. The video showed him pulling something from his pocket while the other one rang the bell. It was a roll of duct tape. The detective told me they'd been tracking similar attempts in 3 other neighborhoods around Jefferson City that week. The pattern was always the same: targeting single mothers, sending a masked decoy to the front, daughter to create a distraction while the man tried to find another way inside. They caught them 2 days later, attempting the same thing at a house in Fulton, about 20 miles away. The man turned out to be a registered sex offender from Arkansas who had been violating his parole. His accomplice was his 19-year-old nephew, whom he'd coerced into helping. When they searched the man's van, they found zip ties, duct tape, rope, and a journal filled with addresses and detailed notes about the daily routines of different women and their children. My address was in there, along with notes about what time I usually left for work, and that I had a young daughter who attended Riverside Elementary. They had been watching us for at least 2 weeks before that night. I testified at the trial. He was sentenced to 25 years. We moved the following summer, and even now, years later, if someone knocks on my door after dark, even if I'm expecting them, I check every window and lock every door twice before I can finally go to sleep. November always felt heavy in our town, like the air itself was tired from holding up the endless gray sky. I just turned 17 that September, the same week I got my learner's permit, and everything about that fall felt like I was waiting for my real life to begin. My best friends, Garrett and Jenna, lived on the same cul-de-sac as me, and we'd done everything together since elementary school. That Saturday night, the first weekend of November, the Andersons down on Burwood Lane were throwing their annual post-Halloween bonfire, the one where everyone brought their leftover candy, and Mr. Anderson told the same ghost stories he'd been telling since we were little. We went every year, mostly for the tradition, watching the younger kids jump at the scary parts while we roasted marshmallows and talked about college applications. The fire was dying down around 11 when we decided to walk home, taking the long way through the neighborhood because none of us wanted the night to end. The streets were empty except for a few porch lights and the occasional jack-o'-lantern, still glowing on a stoop, most already soft and caving in on themselves. Garrett was doing his terrible impression of Mr. Anderson's voice, making Jenna laugh so hard she had to stop walking. I remember thinking how perfect it all felt, how these were the moments I'd miss next year when we were all at different colleges. We were about 4 blocks from the bonfire when I noticed the van for the first time. A dingy white panel van with rust eating through the wheel wells, crawling along behind us, maybe 50 feet back. The weird thing was how it would slow down every time we passed under a streetlight, like the driver was trying to get a better look at us, then speed up slightly in the dark patches between. Garrett was still goofing around, completely oblivious, but Jenna caught my eye and I knew she'd seen it too. I could tell by the way her shoulders tightened and she moved a little closer to us. I tried to keep my voice casual when I suggested. We cut through the park, thinking maybe the van was just heading the same way by coincidence. But when we turned onto Sycamore, the van turned too, maintaining that same creepy distance. The engine made a low, unhealthy rumbling sound, like something was loose under the hood, and I could hear it get louder and softer as the driver played with the gas pedal. Jenna grabbed my arm then, her fingers digging into my jacket sleeve, and whispered that we should call someone. But who were we going to call? Our parents would freak out, maybe ground us for walking home so late, and we weren't even sure if anything was truly wrong yet. The van had tinted windows in the back, completely black, and the front windshield was reflecting the streetlights in a way that made it impossible to see the driver. Garrett finally caught on that something was wrong. He stopped his joking mid-sentence when he turned and saw the van rolling along behind us. It had its headlights off now, just those dim, orange running lights that made it look like some kind of predator with glowing eyes. We started walking faster without discussing it, our sneakers scuffing against the sidewalk in an awkward, hurried rhythm as we tried not to break into a run. The van sped up to match our pace, its engine growling louder. Then it did something that made my whole body go rigid with fear. It pulled ahead of us suddenly, about 100 feet, and turned sharply into a driveway on the right, killing its engine and all its lights completely. The house it had pulled into was completely dark. I knew the family who lived there. The Carters were in Florida for the week. Their daughter was in my chemistry class and had complained about missing the bonfire. The van just sat there in the shadows beside their garage, its engine ticking as it cooled, waiting for us to walk past. We stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk, the three of us breathing hard, even though we hadn't started running yet. I could hear Jenna's teeth chattering, even though the night wasn't that cold. Garrett suggested we cross the street and go back the way we'd come. But before we could move, the van's reverse lights flashed on, two harsh white rectangles in the dark, and it began backing out of the driveway, slow and deliberate. The driver had turned the engine back on, but kept the headlights off, and the van was rolling backward down the street toward us, weaving slightly, as if the driver was watching us in the side mirror instead of looking where he was going. That's when we ran. All three of us at once, no discussion, just pure instinct taking over. We cut hard left through someone's yard, my foot catching on a garden hose and nearly sending me face first into a collection of lawn gnomes. Jenna hauled me up by my elbow as we scrambled between two houses. Behind us, I heard the van's engine roar as it accelerated, tires squealing as it tried to turn around in the narrow street. Then came the sound of a car door slamming, a noise that sent ice straight through my veins. We burst into the backyard of a house I didn't recognize. Motion sensor floodlights blazed to life, lighting us up like we were on a stage. Garrett was already pulling out his phone, his hands fumbling with the passcode. The backyard connected to the next street over through a gap in the fence. We squeezed through it, splinters from the old wood catching on our clothes and tearing Jenna's jacket sleeve. I could taste copper in my mouth from running so hard, and my legs felt disconnected from my body, like they belonged to someone else who just happened to be carrying me. We emerged on Oakmont, at least 6 blocks from where the van had been. Garrett finally got through to 911, practically shouting our location into the phone while we crouched behind someone's SUV. The operator kept asking him to slow down, to explain what was happening. But how could we explain something that sounded so paranoid out loud? A van was following us. The driver turned around to chase us. We were hiding behind a random car, praying the van wouldn't cruise down this street next. The police showed up faster than I expected. 2 cruisers with their lights on, but no sirens. The officers separated us to get our stories while we stood there on Oakmont, looking like we'd been through a hurricane. My officer, an older guy with a thick gray mustache who introduced himself as Officer Brennan, believed us right away. He didn't give us any grief about being out late or suggest we were imagining things. He radioed the van's description to other units, then drove us around the neighborhood in the back of his cruiser, asking us to point out exactly where everything had happened. When we got to the Carter house, there were fresh tire marks in the driveway, deep grooves in the gravel where the van had reversed hard. Officer Brennan took photos with his phone and measured the wheelbase with a tape measure from his trunk. He said something into his radio about checking camera footage from the ATM at the bank on Sycamore, which would have captured any vehicle passing that intersection. About an hour later, we were sitting in the police station waiting for our parents, drinking hot chocolate that tasted like chalk, when Officer Brennan came back with an expression on his face that made my chest tighten all over again. They'd found the van, he said. It was abandoned in the parking lot of Westfield Middle School, the engine still warm, the driver's door hanging open. The weird part was what they found inside. 3 rolls of duct tape, a box of heavy-duty zip ties, and a notebook filled with addresses, including several houses in our neighborhood with days and times written beside them. The Carter house was on the list, with out of town scribbled next to it. There were also notes on 3 targets, with descriptions that matched me, Garrett, and Jenna perfectly, right down to Jenna's purple backpack and Garrett's varsity jacket. The van had been reported stolen from a plumbing company 2 towns over 3 days earlier. They never found who was driving it that night, despite pulling fingerprints and checking every security camera they could find. Our parents went into full protective mode after that, driving us everywhere for weeks, installing new security systems, organizing neighborhood watch meetings that packed the community center. The detective assigned to our case, a woman named Diane Lawson who wore thick-rimmed glasses and always had a coffee stain on her shirt, told us we'd likely been watched for days, maybe weeks. She said whoever was in that van had been planning something specific. She showed us footage from the bank ATM that caught the van passing by earlier that evening, before the bonfire even started, just circling the neighborhood in slow, patient loops. You could make out a figure in the driver's seat, a baseball cap pulled low, but the quality was too grainy for any real details. The notebook had our routines written down: when we walked to school, when we stayed after for clubs, when we typically hung out at the park on weekends. Detective Lawson said we were lucky we'd varied our pattern that night by going to the bonfire. The middle school where they found the van had security cameras too. But whoever ditched it, they knew exactly where the blind spots were, parking in the one corner where 3 broken cameras created a perfect dead zone. The only glimpse they got was a figure in dark clothes walking quickly away from the van, heading toward the tree line at the back of the school property. By the time the K-9 unit arrived, the trail had gone cold at the creek that ran behind the playground. What haunted me most were the small details the detective mentioned almost offhandedly. Fresh scratches on the inside of the van's rear doors, like someone had been testing the locks from the inside, and a receipt from a hardware store dated that very morning for the zip ties and the tape. It had been paid for in cash at a store 40 miles away. Whoever it was had driven 80 miles round trip just to buy those supplies where no one would recognize them, then driven back to hunt us. For weeks after that night, every white van made me stop breathing for a second. Every stranger who looked at us a beat too long sent that same familiar prickle of fear across my skin. Jenna started carrying pepper spray and taking a different route home every single day, never establishing a pattern. Garrett's older brother began picking him up from school in his pickup truck, refusing to let him walk anywhere alone. The police increased patrols in our neighborhood, and for about a month there was always a cruiser parked near the school or making slow, deliberate loops through our streets. But eventually things returned to normal, at least on the surface. Detective Lawson called us in December to say they'd connected our case to 2 similar incidents in neighboring counties, the same pattern with the white van and the notebook. But she told us the other kids hadn't been as lucky as we were. They hadn't run fast enough. She wouldn't give us any details about what had happened to them. The case was never solved, at least not while we were still in high school. By the time I left for college the following year, it had become just another unsolved mystery in the filing cabinets at the police station. Sometimes I still Google it, looking for updates or similar cases, wondering if the person in that van was ever caught somewhere else. I never find anything definitive. What I can't forget is that moment when the van reversed toward us in the dark, how deliberate it was, how patient they had been, watching us for weeks, learning our habits, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Jenna, Garrett, and I are still close, even though we're spread across different states now. Every November when we text each other around the anniversary, none of us mentions it directly. But we all know what we're really checking on, making sure we're all still okay, still here, still running faster than whatever was chasing us that night. Snow was coming to Plattsburgh that Monday, and I could smell it in the air when I stepped onto my porch with my morning coffee. After 26 years of marriage to Nathan, I'd gotten pretty good at reading warning signs, though apparently not good enough to avoid an October divorce that left me starting over in a duplex that smelled of old wood and whatever the previous tenant had cooked for the last decade. Frank, my elderly landlord who lived in the other half, had promised quick maintenance response times, which mattered since teaching 7th grade math didn't leave me with much energy for home repairs. The place had its charm, though, with original hardwood floors and tall windows that actually opened, unlike the sealed units in most modern apartments. I'd been there exactly 9 days, still learning which floorboards creaked and which light switches controlled what. That morning started like the others since I'd moved in, except for the forecast promising 6 to 8 inches by nightfall. I stood in my living room watching the sky turn that sickly yellow that precedes every upstate New York storm, when I heard a faint, weird scraping noise from below. It was almost like fingernails on concrete, but steady and deliberate. I got down on my knees, pressed my ear against the cold wood, and listened. The sound continued for about 10 seconds, paused, then started again. The heating had just kicked on, so I figured it was probably the old pipes groaning, Or maybe Frank was organizing something in our shared basement. He'd mentioned he kept his holiday decorations down there. I finished my coffee, grabbed my stack of ungraded tests, and drove to school through streets that were already emptying out in anticipation of the storm. School let out early at 1:30 because of the weather. By the time I pulled into my driveway, thick flakes were already coating everything. Frank's car was gone, which wasn't unusual. He'd mentioned he spent Mondays at his daughter's place in Malone, about an hour west. The snow was coming down so thick I could barely make out his features. But I could see his lips moving as if he were talking to himself, his breath puffing out in quick white clouds that vanished into the storm. When he looked up, maybe sensing me watching, his eyes met mine through the gap in the blinds. They were the palest blue I'd ever seen, almost white like a husky's. He didn't run when he saw me. He just stood there, still gripping whatever tool he'd been using, snow gathering on his shoulders and in his tangled hair. Then he smiled. Not a normal smile, but something that showed too many teeth, yellowed and broken, and he pressed his face right up against the glass. I could see dirt caked under his fingernails as he tapped on the window. 3 soft knocks, like he was visiting a friend. The dispatcher was asking what was happening, but I couldn't form words. The man outside tilted his head, studying me like I was something fascinating he'd discovered. And then he spoke, loud enough for me to hear through the glass. He said my name, my actual first name, clear as day. Not yelling, not threatening, just conversational, like we were old acquaintances. He knew who I was. He'd probably gone through my mail, my papers, everything I'd thrown away since moving in. He knew my schedule, when I left for work, when I came home. He'd been living underneath me, learning me, and now, with the police still minutes away and the snow creating a white wall around my house, he wanted me to know that he knew. I screamed at him to get away, that the police were coming, and that seemed to amuse him because he actually laughed. This wet, rattling sound I could hear even through the window. Then he held up something in his other hand. It took me a second to realize what it was. My spare house key. The one I'd hidden under a decorative rock by the back door my second day there. He dangled it between his thumb and finger, making sure I could see it clearly through the falling snow. And then he walked away from the window, disappearing around the corner of the house. The dispatcher was practically yelling now, telling me to get to a room with a lock and barricade myself in. But all I could think was that he had a key, had probably always had it. And every night I'd locked my doors thinking I was safe. He could have walked right in whenever he wanted. I ran to my bedroom, slammed the door, and shoved my dresser in front of it. The wood scraped across the floor, making the same sound I'd been hearing from the basement. Then I heard him. The front door opening. Not forced, not broken, just the normal sound of a key turning in the lock and the door swinging open on its hinges. His footsteps were slow and deliberate on the hardwood, and he was humming something, a tune I didn't recognize. The dispatcher said the police were 3 minutes out, maybe less, but I could hear him in my kitchen now, opening drawers, looking for something. Then the footsteps came toward the bedroom. He knocked on the door, polite as could be, and asked if I wanted to talk about the rent. The rent, like he owned the place, like I was the intruder. He said Frank had promised him he could stay, that they had an arrangement that I wasn't supposed to be here yet. His voice was calm, reasonable even, which made it so much worse. He said he'd been waiting for the right time to introduce himself, that he didn't mean to scare me, that we could share the space if I wanted. The dresser shook as he tested the door, and I could see the wood starting to splinter near the lock. Then the sirens cut through everything, that beautiful wailing sound growing louder every second. The pressure on my bedroom door stopped immediately. I heard his footsteps retreat fast across the living room. The front door slammed, and through my bedroom window I watched him sprint through the snow toward the tree line behind the house, that oversized army jacket flapping behind him like wings. The police found me still barricaded in my bedroom. It took 3 officers to convince me it was safe to move the dresser. They searched the basement, documented everything, the sleeping bag, the food, a notebook filled with observations about my daily routine written in pencil, even sketches of me sleeping on the couch. They found where he'd been getting in and out through the coal chute. the outside opening hidden behind an overgrown juniper bush that Frank apparently hadn't trimmed in years. The man's name was Howard Pelliter, a local who'd been in and out of psychiatric facilities for decades. Frank's nephew recognized him from the description and said Howard used to do odd jobs for Frank years ago, back before his mental health completely deteriorated. They never caught him that night. The snow covered his tracks within an hour, and he knew those woods better than anyone. But they boarded up the coal chute, changed all my locks, and a patrol car sat outside my duplex for the next 3 nights. I moved out the following week, stayed with my sister in Albany until I found a new place, a modern apartment on the 3rd floor with proper locks and a security system. Frank tried to keep my security deposit, said I broke the lease, but I had a lawyer friend write him a letter that changed his mind real quick. I heard from another teacher months later that Howard turned up at a homeless shelter in Burlington when the weather got bad in January. The police arrested him there, and he went back to a psychiatric facility. Though for how long, I never found out. I still teach at the same school, still grade papers in the evening. But now I live in a place where every sound has an explanation, where footsteps belong to neighbors I know by name, and where the only thing under my floor is another apartment with a young couple who play their music too loud on weekends. And that's fine by me. The cold had teeth that November night in Alaska, the kind that bites through 3 layers of clothing and makes your bones ache. I'd been hauling frozen seafood from Anchorage down to Fairbanks for about 6 years by then enough runs to know every pothole and curve on the park's highway. My rig, a beat-up Peterbilt that had seen better days sometime during the Clinton administration, was parked at a pull-off near mile marker 147, one of those spots truckers use when the official rest areas are full or too far away. The heater was running on low, just enough to keep frost from forming on the inside of the windshield. I'd wedged myself into the sleeper cab with my usual setup, a sleeping bag rated for 40 below, wool socks doubled up, and my phone charging on the little shelf I'd installed myself. Outside, the darkness was absolute. That special kind of black you only get when you're 50 miles from the nearest town and the clouds are covering whatever stars might be brave enough to shine. I remember checking my watch right before falling asleep. One of those habits you develop when your life revolves around delivery schedules and hours of service regulations. The green digits showed 9:47 p.m., which meant I could get a solid 6 hours before I needed to start rolling again to make my morning drop-off. The last thing I heard was the tick-tick-tick of the engine cooling down, metal contracting in the cold. A sound as familiar to me as my own heartbeat. Sleep came easy that night, the exhaustion of 14 hours on icy roads pulling me under like quicksand. I'd parked here probably 30 times before, always the same spot where the ground was level enough that I wouldn't wake up with a crick in my neck from sleeping at an angle. Other truckers knew about this place too, but tonight I was alone. Just my rig and the occasional groan of wind pushing against the trailer. The knocking started at 1:14 a.m., according to that same watch, when I jolted awake. 3 measured raps on the driver's side window. Not frantic, but deliberate, like someone calmly trying to get your attention at a store counter. My first thought was another trucker. Maybe somebody who'd blown a tire or needed jumper cables. Happens more than you'd think out here. I sat up in the dark, my breath fogging in the cold air, and fumbled for the LED flashlight I keep velcroed to the wall. The knocking came again. Same pattern. 3 steady knocks that echoed hollow against the glass. Through the sleeper cab's small window, I could barely make out a shape standing beside my door, just a dark outline against the darker night. The person stepped back when they saw me moving, giving me room to climb forward into the driver's seat. When I clicked on the flashlight and aimed it through the window, the beam lit up a man's face I'll never forget. Not because it was scary or deformed, but because it was so perfectly ordinary, except for one detail. He was sweating. Here was this guy standing in -20 weather wearing just a flannel shirt and jeans, no coat, no gloves, and there were actual beads of sweat running down his forehead. He had sandy hair cut short, maybe mid-40s, clean-shaven, the kind of face you'd see at any hardware store and forget 5 minutes later. But that sweat, it was wrong, like seeing someone sunbathing in a blizzard. He smiled when the light hit him, raised his hand in a little wave and mouthed something I couldn't hear through the glass. I cracked the window maybe 2 inches, keeping my hand on the gear shift out of habit, ready to fire up the engine if needed. "Hey there, friend," he said, and his voice was steady, casual, like we were meeting at a barbecue instead of a frozen pull-off in the middle of nowhere. "Sorry to wake you, but my car died about a quarter mile back just around that curve. Battery's fine, engine turns over but she won't catch. Think it might be the fuel line freezing up. Happens all the time up here, right?" He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, and I watched the sweat immediately freeze into tiny crystals on his skin. "I was wondering if you could help me push it, get it rolling downhill a bit. Sometimes that's all it takes to get the fuel flowing again. 2 strong guys like us shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. His eyes never left mine the whole time he talked. Not blinking much, just steady eye contact that felt rehearsed somehow. The thing about truckers is we help each other out. It's an unwritten rule of the road. I've changed more tires and given more jump starts than I can count, pulled guys out of ditches, shared food when somebody's broke down waiting for a tow. But every instinct I'd developed in 20 years of driving was screaming that something was wrong with this picture. Beyond the sweat, beyond the lack of winter clothes, there was the timing. He said his car was a quarter mile back, but I'd been asleep for over 3 hours and hadn't heard any vehicle pass by. And trust me, you hear everything on a quiet night like that. The gravel crunches, engine noise carries, especially around curves where people tap their brakes. Plus, if his car really wouldn't start, how was pushing it going to help with a frozen fuel line? That's not how engines work, and anybody who drives in Alaska knows that. "Where's your coat?" I asked through the crack in the window, watching my breath turn to ice crystals in the air between us. The question seemed to catch him off guard for just a second. His smile flickered like a TV losing signal before coming back full strength. "Left it in the car," he said, laughing a little. "Stupid, I know, but I was so frustrated when she died that I just started walking. Figured I'd find help quick. Been walking for maybe 20 minutes now. Worked up quite a sweat, actually." He wiped his brow again for emphasis. "Come on, man. I'm freezing out here despite how it looks. My wife's going to kill me if I don't make it home tonight. Got my daughter's recital tomorrow. She's playing violin. First chair." He pulled out a wallet, started showing me a photo through the window. But in the dark, with just my flashlight, all I could see was the reflection on the plastic sleeve. I kept the window cracked but didn't move to open the door. And I could see his patience starting to wear thin, though he tried to hide it. His jaw muscles tightened just a fraction, and he shifted his weight from foot to foot. Not like someone trying to stay warm, but like someone coiling a spring. "Tell you what," I said, trying to sound helpful. "Let me call you a tow truck. I've got good cell signal here, and there's a 24-hour service out of Cantwell. They could be here in maybe an hour." I reached for my phone, making a show of it, but kept my eyes locked on him. That's when his whole demeanor changed, like he'd dropped a mask. The friendly smile vanished, replaced by something flat and calculating. "No need for that," he said, his voice different now, lower, more insistent. "Just need you to step out for 5 minutes. Your truck will be fine, I promise. Just need some help pushing, that's all." That's when I saw it. Just a glimpse in my side mirror. Movement behind my trailer, maybe 30 feet back. Another person trying to stay in the shadows, moving slowly along the passenger side of my rig. The man at my window must have seen my eyes flick to the mirror because he immediately knocked harder, trying to recapture my attention. "Hey, come on, buddy. Don't leave me hanging here. Alaska rules, right? We help each other out." His hand went to his pocket, and I didn't wait to see what he was reaching for. I cranked the engine, and the Peterbilt roared to life, diesel smoke billowing black in the frigid air. The man jumped back from the door. In my passenger side mirror, I saw the second person sprint away from my truck, heading for the tree line. I slammed the truck into gear and hit the air release, the brakes hissing like angry snakes. The man was shouting something now, but I couldn't hear it over the engine noise, and I didn't want to. As I pulled out, my headlights swept across the pull-off. That's when I saw their vehicle tucked behind a cluster of spruce trees where I hadn't noticed it before. A dark pickup truck with the engine running. Exhaust visible in the cold, a third person sitting in the driver's seat. No broken down car, no mechanical trouble. Just 3 people who'd been waiting in the dark for someone to stop. I gunned it onto the highway, checking my mirrors constantly for the next 10 miles, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. My CB radio was crackling with static. With shaking fingers, I switched to channel 19, the truckers' channel, to warn anyone else who might be heading that way. The chatter on the CB that night is what made everything sink in. About 40 minutes after I'd gotten back on the road, still jumpy at every set of headlights in my mirrors, I heard another driver handle Kodiak Bear. It talking about something that had happened at the Broad Pass rest area, maybe 15 miles from where I'd been parked. A driver had stopped to use the facilities, left his rig running like we all do in winter to keep the diesel from gelling. Came back to find 2 men inside his cab. They'd beaten him pretty bad when he tried to stop them. Left him on the ground with a concussion and broken ribs while they took off with his truck and $50,000 worth of electronics he'd been hauling to Fairbanks. The state troopers found the truck 6 hours later, abandoned and stripped clean off a logging road. Kodiak Bear said the driver was lucky to be alive, that the temperature had dropped to -30 that night, and if another trucker hadn't found him 20 minutes later, he would have frozen to death right there in that rest area parking lot. I made my delivery in Fairbanks the next morning. I barely slept for the next 3 nights, kept seeing that sweating face at my window every time I closed my eyes. I filed a report with the troopers, described everything I could remember, but they said without a license plate or a better description of the vehicle, there wasn't much they could do. The officer I talked to, a woman who'd been working the highways for 15 years, told me I'd probably save my own life by trusting my instincts. She said these kinds of setups were getting more common, groups targeting long-haul truckers because we often carry valuable cargo and always have diesel fuel, which sells well on the black market. The sweat on that man's face still bothers me when I think about it. And I finally figured out why he was sweating in that cold adrenaline, pure and simple. He was pumped up for violence, ready to do whatever it took to get me out of that cab. Now I sleep with a crowbar next to my bed in the sleeper, and I never crack my window for anyone at night, no matter how legitimate their story sounds. That pull-off at mile marker 147 is still there, but I never stop at it anymore. I'd rather drive an extra hour tired than park in that particular darkness again. The break had been long overdue. Weeks of back-to-back meetings, constant messages, and the kind of exhaustion that makes every day blur together had started to eat away at me. When an ad for a digital detox retreat appeared on my laptop screen late one night, the idea sounded perfect. A quiet lodge tucked somewhere in the Oregon countryside. No screens, no distractions, just time to recharge. The price was low enough to make me wonder if it was some new wellness startup trying to build a reputation, but I booked it anyway. I needed silence more than I needed logic. The drive there took most of a gray November afternoon. The roads grew narrower and lonelier the farther I went, the trees swallowing what little sunlight there was. The sign for Airvale Lodge looked almost handmade, nailed to a crooked wooden post by the side of the road. When I finally pulled into the gravel lot, my phone had no signal. I took it as a good sign, a forced break from everything. The main building looked rustic, a wide porch lined with mismatched rocking chairs and a carved wooden door that groaned when it opened. A woman in a beige uniform greeted me inside. Her voice was gentle but rehearsed, every word precise. She asked for my name, then reached out her hand and said they'd be holding on to all electronic devices for the duration of the program. Before I could protest, another staff member appeared with a tray lined with numbered envelopes. My phone went into one, sealed with a sticker that read, "Serenity requires surrender." They gave me a cotton uniform and a name tag, my own name printed in bold black letters. "Participants blend better that way," the woman said with a kind of warmth that didn't invite questions. Dinner that night felt strange. Everyone wore the same pale clothes, moving quietly around the long wooden tables. No one seemed to know each other, but they acted like they did, smiling, nodding, serving food in synchronized rhythm. The staff stood along the walls watching, never eating. When I tried to make small talk with the woman sitting beside me, she simply said, "It's easier if you let go of words." I laughed awkwardly, thinking it was part of the retreat's minimalist philosophy, but something about her expression stayed with me through the night. The next morning began with a bell that rang through the halls at dawn. Everyone lined up in the courtyard like students waiting for roll call. The air smelled like pine and damp soil, and the mist hung low between the trees surrounding the property. A man who introduced himself only as Guide Thomas gave a short speech about releasing digital toxins and rediscovering natural rhythm. His tone was calm, but every sentence carried the kind of certainty that made me uneasy. When I asked how long the program lasted, he smiled without answering. "You will know when it ends," he said, as if it were something obvious. The day unfolded with scheduled silence and strange rituals. We had to walk in single file along forest trails, pause at marked stones, and write affirmations on paper that were later burned in a communal fire pit. Meals were timed to the minute. Every clock in the lodge showed the same hour, even though the sunlight shifted throughout the day. When I asked another participant how long she'd been there, she looked around before whispering. I stopped counting after the third sunrise. Her eyes darted to the nearest staff member. Then she smiled tightly, like she regretted saying it. By the afternoon, the sense of calm that the staff tried to impose had started to crack. I noticed people pacing near the windows or staring too long at the locked gate beyond the main courtyard. I decided to test it myself during a meditation session when everyone's eyes were closed. The gravel path leading to the exit was longer than it looked, and my steps sounded louder than they should have. When I reached the gate, a heavy chain was looped through its bars. A padlock the size of my hand hung in the middle. Through the metal, I could see the empty road stretching into the trees. No cars, no signs of movement, only a silence so deep it felt staged. That evening, I went to the front desk and asked for my phone. The receptionist, a young man with perfect posture and a voice too calm, checked a list behind the counter. "You signed the agreement," he said, not even looking at me. "You're here until the program ends," I asked again, louder this time, and he repeated the same line, word for word, as if rehearsed. A couple of staff members appeared behind him, blocking the hallway. Their faces were blank, but their stance wasn't. That was the moment I realized no one here was simply following wellness routines. They were following orders. That night I barely slept. The lodge walls seemed thinner, the quiet heavier. From my room window, I could see the courtyard dimly lit by lanterns, shadows moving in slow, deliberate patterns. Around midnight, a low hum echoed through the trees, not an engine or generator, but a rhythmic pulse that grew louder every few seconds. When I opened my door to listen, 2 staff members were standing at the end of the hallway facing me. Neither spoke, but one raised a finger to his lips, motioning for silence. I shut the door and pressed my back against it, heart pounding in my chest. The following morning, the woman I'd spoken to at dinner was gone. Her bed was neatly made, her name tag missing from the wall hook. When I asked one of the cleaners where she'd gone, she replied, she completed her process. That phrase circulated throughout the day like a chant, whispered during meals, murmured by staff, written on the whiteboard in the hall, completion is peace. By then, I understood that no one here was trying to rest or heal. They were being reshaped into something obedient. I decided to escape that night. During the final group meditation, I hid one of the metal utensils from the dining table under my sleeve. When the lights dimmed, I slipped out through a service corridor that smelled of bleach and wet wood. The kitchen door opened to the back of the property near the same gate I'd tried before. Using the fork, I wedged the chain loose enough to slip it free of the latch. My fingers were raw, the sound of metal scraping metal slicing through the still air. For a second, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but I didn't look back. I just ran. The road beyond the gate stretched into the forest. No lights, no signs, just endless darkness. I walked for what felt like hours until a delivery truck appeared in the distance. The driver, an older man with tired eyes, slowed down when he saw me. I told him I'd been hiking and got lost. He didn't ask questions. When I reached the nearest town, I went straight to the police. They said there was no record of a place called Airvale Lodge anywhere in the county, and no retreat registered under that name. I have searched for it online since then, and the website that first drew me in no longer exists. I still have the name tag they gave me, plain white plastic, my name printed in black letters. Sometimes I catch myself staring at it, trying to remember the faces of the people still inside those walls. I never saw them again, but sometimes late at night, I hear that same low hum from the woods behind my apartment. The coast feels different once the tourists are gone. The air turns sharp, the sand loses its warmth, and the ocean seems louder, as if it's reclaiming the silence. I'd taken a last-minute freelance gig, planning to spend a quiet November in a small beach house outside a fishing village in Maine. The owner's photos showed weathered shingles, pale blue shutters, and a wraparound porch that faced the sea. It looked like the kind of place where time slowed down, exactly what I needed to finish a photo series before the snow came. The house itself stood a few miles from town, down a narrow road lined with pines. The front steps creaked under my boots as I carried my gear inside. It smelled faintly of salt and old books, the kind of musty comfort that hinted at years of damp air. The layout was simple: a kitchen and living room downstairs, 2 bedrooms on the main floor, and a staircase that ended at a locked door labeled storage only. The host had mentioned the upper floor wasn't in use, so I didn't think much about it then. That first day passed quietly. I spent the afternoon walking along the dunes, catching the late sunlight breaking through thick clouds. When night came, the wind began to howl through the cracks in the window frames. The house groaned and shifted with every gust, but there was something peaceful about it. I made tea, edited a few photos, and fell asleep on the couch with the faint hiss of the ocean outside the window. Sometime in the middle of the night, a sound woke me. It was steady and rhythmic, not the wind, not the surf. Footsteps, light but deliberate, pacing directly above me. I sat up, the couch springs creaking beneath me, and listened. The steps moved slowly from one end of the ceiling to the other, then stopped. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe pipes, maybe the house settling, but then a faint tune drifted through the air. Music, something old and scratchy, like a record playing from another room. I turned off the lamp and held my breath, trying to locate the source of the sound. The melody had a strange quality, a waltz maybe, though the notes seemed warped and distant, like it was being played from behind thick walls. I checked the time. It was close to 3 in the morning. I finally grabbed my flashlight and climbed the stairs. Each step made the old boards groan under my weight. When I reached the door, the music stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the dark around me. I tried the handle. It didn't budge, locked from the inside. I knocked softly, half expecting someone to answer, half hoping no one would. Nothing. My pulse hammered in my ears as I pressed my ear to the wood. Faint shuffling, a drag of movement like someone turning in place. Then a single solid thump against the door. I stumbled back, nearly losing my balance on the steps. For a moment I stood there, frozen in disbelief, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. Eventually I forced myself back downstairs, locked my bedroom door, and waited for daylight. The morning light made everything seem harmless again. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I had probably been dreaming. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I walked around the outside of the house, camera in hand, tracing the roofline. The upper floor windows were there, all right. 3 of them boarded up, paint peeling away in uneven strips. No lights, no movement, just the wind rattling the loose boards. I snapped a few photos, more out of habit than intention, and went back inside to make coffee. When I messaged the host, I kept it polite. I asked if anyone might have been doing maintenance upstairs, mentioning the music. The reply came quickly. The house doesn't have an upstairs anymore. It was destroyed in a fire years ago. I stared at the screen, rereading it. I could still hear the footsteps in my head, the pattern of them, deliberate and human. I wanted to argue, to ask for proof, but something about the certainty in their message stopped me. Instead, I typed a short thank you and set the phone face down on the counter. That evening, I avoided going near the stairs. I cooked dinner with the radio on just to drown out the creaks of the house. Around midnight, the wind picked up again, carrying the smell of seaweed and smoke through a gap in the window frame. I sat in the living room scrolling through my camera roll when something caught my attention. One of the exterior shots I had taken that morning. In the reflection of an upstairs window, behind the warped glass, there was a faint outline of a person. The shape was blurred, but there was no mistaking it. Someone had been standing there watching. Sleep was impossible after that. I kept the lights on and stayed by the window until dawn. The next morning, I decided to check the attic space from the outside again. The boards over the windows looked undisturbed, but when I touched the edges, flakes of charcoal rubbed off on my fingers. Beneath the wood, the smell of burnt plaster seeped out, faint but distinct. I followed the scent around the back of the house and found a small hatch hidden under the eaves, sealed with rusted nails. It looked like no one had touched it in years. I packed my things that afternoon, told the host I had a family emergency, and left before the sky darkened. As I drove away, I glanced once in the rearview mirror. The upstairs windows were still boarded, but for a moment I could swear one of the boards shifted slightly, just enough for a sliver of darkness to peer through. I didn't stop to look again. I reached the main road and kept driving until the ocean was only a whisper behind me. Weeks later, When I developed the last roll of film, one photo came out that I didn't remember taking. It was the interior of a narrow hallway, wood-paneled, scorched at the edges, and at the far end, a gramophone stood in perfect condition, the needle resting on a spinning record. I still don't know how it appeared among my shots, but I boxed up that film and never touched it again. Sometimes when the wind is high, I can still hear that same warped waltz playing in my head.